We now want to move on to COVID-19 procurement and the corruption which was alleged around that issue. The narrative, if you look at social media, is that this corruption was exposed by some journalists and civic activists. Can you explain?
That's not true, actually. Mm-hmm. But I think you should also understand that we don't run government on social media. We don't run government on Twitter. So we have our own checks and controls within government. And by the time the issue was raised in social media, we were already dealing with it as government. And actually, the anomaly in this transaction was actually picked up by His Excellency. But again, I want to emphasize that by the time this matter was raised in social media, we as government of Zimbabwe, because the matter had been raised by His Excellency in cabinet, and directives given to the former Minister of Health and my minister, and also the instructions for me as the accounting officer to say, this is how we are now going to manage. We were already taking corrective action.
Can you tell us whether or not the country lost any money in this deal and how much that was?
There is no financial loss to Zimbabwe on that contract.
None at all?
No, none at all. There's no financial loss. On the basis of the information that has been translated to us because of the nature of how the contract was designed. The contract was designed in such a way that a payment could only be effected upon advanced delivery of drugs and medicines into Zimbabwe, of the value that would then pay. So drugs and medicines, right, to the tune of 2 million were delivered, and an amount of 2 million was paid. And I do not know where everyone who talks about a 60 million fraud, 50 million corruption, where they get the 60 million from, right? So if someone illegally tries to sign a contract, why would someone then come and say there's a contract that has been signed when the contract is illegal and it's been cancelled? Drugs worth $2 million were delivered and 2 million was paid, but there were some complications in terms of the normal know your customer, anti-money laundering rule regulation, and even as we speak today, that money is not being transferred to the supplier. And there are ongoing processes to see how it can be managed. It might end up with the supplier. It might even come back to us. And we might then have to engage the supplier in terms of our contract. The first one, only the 20 million.
Yeah.
So let me make it very clear. There is no $60 million contract to talk about.
The economy. Are we in an economic crisis? If the answer is no, which is what I expect you will say, what are your reasons?
You see, we love the word crisis. How do you define an economy? You define an economy by fundamentals, isn't it? Yeah? And if you look at the TSP, it spoke about addressing fundamentals, which have been addressed, right? It's about fundamentals. So in the past, when the fundamentals were wrong, everybody focused on fundamentals. Everybody would say, look, you've got a high budget deficit, right? Everybody will come and say, you've got a high current account deficit. Everybody will come and say that there is unsustainable borrowing by government from the central bank. That's what everybody would say. That was the narrative then. That those positions were corrected by this current government in less than 13 months of coming into government. Right? So a current account deficit, which used to average 1 billion, has now been changed to a current account surplus. Current account. So, which means that we are now exporting more than what we are importing. And this has been consistent for the past 18 months. Right? On the fiscal front, we do not spend money that we don't have. And at the end of the day, over the 18 months, we've consistently had a surplus, right? Because we prioritize better, we spend better, and I will also tell you, we control wasteful expenditure better. So if you go into government today, they will tell you that the room for wasteful expenditure is very, very limited, if it still does exist. We are ruthless as Treasury in wasteful expenditure. We are ruthless as Treasury in poor prioritization. Yeah? So if you go to all the ministries, they will tell you that Treasury will be very categorical. If we think it's wasteful expenditure, we will tell you, we will not give you the money. If we think you are not prioritizing well, we will tell you and we will not give you the money. But where we believe that we are going to spend money in the best interest of Zimbabweans, where we are going to build schools, we have been building schools, state-of-the-art schools. I know you guys have got other challenges, but look, I would want you to go. We have built 27 schools in new resettlement areas over the past 2 years.
Right, perhaps we will get back to the developmental issues a bit later on. I want to go back to the economic fundamentals and the state of the country's finances, which you say you are very happy about. You are from Kambuzuma, something that you are very proud of. But at what point are the ordinary people in Kambuzuma going to start to feel this progress that you say we have made with respect to the management of the country's economy?
For the first time in 40 years, right, we have a government and we have got a president, for the first time, it has never happened in Zimbabwe, who has said that he wants to pay 1 million, listen to the number, 1 million vulnerable households a social grant. We can have a debate about the amount, about inflation, right? That's a debate. But are those not signs, right, of a government in control? Yeah? But there are other processes, because COVID, because we have to register, and we then had COVID, so it has delayed the registration. I think we now have registered 116,000 people whom we are paying 300, but even that 300, now we are reviewing it. So that surplus is real, and it's going to the person in Kambuzuma at 1603 Watonga Street in Kambuzuma. They will get the money. It might be 300, it might be a reviewed amount. Why haven't we paid? Why are we only having 116? Because those are the ones at this stage we have safely registered. Do we have the money to pay that grant to 1 million people? Yes. We don't commit to resources that we don't have. So is there a surplus? Yes, there's a surplus. And is that surplus that has resulted in the president of the country saying, I want to help the vulnerable people. I want to help my vulnerable people. So, Honorable Minister of Finance, is your surplus real? He says to the president, yes, it's real. He comes and says, Mr. Treasurer, to the state, Mr. Guvamatanga, is the money in the bank account? I say, yes, Mr. President, the money is in the bank account. Then he says, how do I get it to the people? They say, but if you want to get it to the people now, Mr. President, you now have to talk to Minister Bafiba, because he is the one who's got the people. Right? So the money is there, and we will get the money to the people.
Mr. Guvamatanga, you were saying earlier on that we have had to deal with this global pandemic as a country using local resources, and that the fact we are able to do that is as a result of the way you have managed the country's finances. Can you explain that point a bit further?
We have spent to date about 2.7 billion, expanded and disbursed to deal with COVID-19 issues. 2.7 billion is what the government has expanded. I authorize it every day, that I know the number. We have also spent close to about $3-4 million direct US dollars in intervening, because unlike other countries, we have not received any direct support from the IMF, from World Bank, So there have been some bilateral friendly who have given us direct support. But most of the intervention so far right, is direct from government. We appreciate the support from other partners, but again, I have to be honest with it. Because of the long, convoluted process of using third parties to dispose of those resources, they take longer. So if we had waited, then there would be heavy problems. But because our finances were in such a good state, we were able to directly and quickly intervene. And that is despite the drought. And that is despite the cyclone. And we've been able to do it without printing money. And everyone else, despite the support, they have had to print money. Yeah. We haven't printed money. Yeah? In the past, look, the legacy issues, we used to run budget deficits of 40%. Before the new government came into place, budget deficits were 40%. I'm now coming back to the fundamental. So allow me to actually clearly articulate. Yeah, okay. Budget deficits were 40%. 96% of revenues went to salaries, which meant that there was only 4% to build roads.
So where are we now?
No, I'll get there. Okay. And if civil servants did not know when they will be paid, yeah, they did not pay debt, they did not pay day. For the past 2 years, since this new government came, we advertise in advance. That's how confident we are. Right? Kuti muna July, muna August, vashandi verhurumende vachatambira musi wakati. Ende musi uwoyo uchingosvika, mari inopinda muaccount. Yeah? But we are now on out, instead of 96%, wages and salaries now constitute just about 50%
of
government revenues. Yeah? So outside not knowing when they're going to be paid, I have spoken to colleagues in the civil service. They say that they used to bring their own tea, their own sugar, because the previous government could not even buy them their tea and sugar. Yeah? And if you ask them today, they are well resourced. We've had a huge gap. But again, there's an issue there, which actually people don't know, that over and above all the other challenges that I'm dealing with, 17% of my current spend on my budget, this new budget, is to cater for legacy issues left by the previous government, unpaid bills.
PSU also said earlier on that you have managed to reduce the government wage bill as a percentage of your revenues from over 90% before the Second Republic down to 50%. But is that not because you're not increasing the salaries of your government employees?
If you actually look at the fundamentals, because how do you pay people, right? You pay people according to the cost of living, right? You pay people according to the poverty bottom line, right? So the intervention by His Excellency to pay $75 was informed by the need to make sure that we pay civil servants a living wage. So if you take the Zim dollar component, the US dollar component, and you convert it, you will find that it's above the PTL, right? But we have to understand that government is not only here to meet salaries like what the previous government was doing. They would meet salaries. There were no developments of roads, right? Right now, if you go to Harare Bight Bridge, 100 kilometers of roads has been done. The target for this year is 200 kilometers, self-funded. We are not taking any loan. So all that tarring that you are seeing around the Harare Bight Bridge road is funded by the budget, is funded by the surplus. Because people always say, no, you're talking about the surplus. Where is the surplus? The surplus, go to Harare Bight Bridge, drive there, you will see the surplus, right? And I would want you to go and showcase that. Go to all the new areas. I talk about schools that we've built, 23 state-of-the-art schools. Go there and see the schools, and you see the surplus, right? You can go, we are running 6 major dam projects, right? 6 major dam projects in various provinces. Go to those dam projects, you will see the surplus. If you go onto the transport system, which we are continuing to improve, right? Something that His Excellency is so passionate about, which is public transport, highly subsidized. And there's science to it. There's science to it. Because there's actually economic and scientific proof that the best way of putting money into the pockets of the vulnerable is through subsidized transportation. We have researched it. We didn't just wake up and say we want to subsidize transport or we want to subsidize Zupco. No, we woke up and we said we want to put this surplus back into the pocket of Zimbabweans. And we said, how do we do it? And we researched. And the research then said subsidized and cheaper public transport is what puts the surplus into the pocket of the people. So the person in Kabuzuma is benefiting because if you do the numbers today, what we charge, we are literally putting, and we've done the numbers, putting an extra $868 every month into the pocket of anyone who uses public transport. We are putting the surplus into the pockets of the people. The last one, millimil, right? Millimil. We know the price of millimil. But again, we have got science to say it's the staple food. Everyone wants millimil in Zimbabwe so that they have sadza. How do we put back the surplus into the pockets of Zimbabweans? Have subsidized millimil because it's the staple food. We didn't decide to have subsidized macaroni or subsidized rice. We subsidize sadza because we know that it's porridge in the morning for the children and it's sadza in the evening for everyone. Yeah. And that's what we're subsidizing. That's the surplus. It's there, and that's how we are taking it into the pocket of the guy in Watonga Street in Kambuzuma.
And now, talking about money that is going into the pockets of ordinary Zimbabweans, there is the issue of the $75 COVID allowance for civil servants. The criticism there is that this is phantom money because of the restrictions around accessing that money in cash. Can you explain what is happening there?
This is not phantom money. What money are we using to pay the civil service? We are using taxes and VAT that you pay every day. So we are using money that is being collected in Bedbridge now. Are we being paid taxes by phantom money? No. Are we being paid duties by phantom money? No. So I can demonstrate to you that we have collected VAT in US dollars. We have collected royalties in US dollars. We have collected duty in US dollars. That's the money we are using to pay civil servants. We have not printed electronic dollars. This government is not that irresponsible. Because if you print them, then how do you replace them? So we even wait to make sure that we've got enough money. Then we pay. So how does it become real money? When you are paying the VAT, when you are buying in the shops, when you are paying the duty, then it comes to government. At the moment we pay it to civil service, how does it become phantom money? But let me explain where the problem is. Physical cash, right? We are on sanctions. That's a fact. And our ability to access physical cash is very, very limited. That's point number one. So we don't have the access to physical cash in that magnitude. But there's another point. We employ 333,000 civil servants, right? 333. We have got 167,000 pensioners. That's 500,000 people. Banks are offering limited services. Most of them have closed most of their branches. Again, if we were to ask 500,000 people to queue, that makes us a very irresponsible government. Very irresponsible. Where do you expect 500,000 people to go and queue and get the cash? Yeah? So people should give us credit because it's not like we just wake up and throw things. There is a process into how we make our decisions. A very thorough process. Right? And a very consultative process. And a very guided process. So at the end of the day, we looked at it and said, so the capacity of the banks at the moment, you would actually need 4.5 months to clear 1 month allowance from the banks.
Right, PEMSEC, we will take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about legacy issues, reforms you are doing on the foreign exchange market, as well as the stock exchanges. Join us after this short break. Welcome back as we continue this discussion with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, Mr. George Guvamatanga. PEMSEC, when we went for the break,
Yes.
we were talking about the errant behavior by banks, retailers. I mean, there are two sides to this issue. There is the role of government or the public side of things. Are you satisfied with the supports that you're getting from the private sector?
Look, at this particular moment in time, I think as government, we are very much concerned with the extent of the support that we are getting from the public sector. But look, it's not everyone. You will always find that errant behavior is not in everyone. There are companies, there are banks that you work with very well, but there will be a few errant ones. But an economy is an ecosystem. You want everything to work. So because at this particular moment in time, when we introduced the $35 allowance for civil servants, we sat down with the wholesalers and retailers, and we sat down with the banks, and we agreed that they were going to install systems and infrastructure to support card-based transacting on US dollar. But now, they said they were going to do it. When we've then asked and said, why haven't you done it? They then come and say, but look, we cannot incur costs to support a 3-month program, right? But this is not a 3-month program. No, I'm not talking about just civil servants, because the same corporates came to government and said, please allow us to trade in both Zimbabwe dollar and US dollar. You see, the decision to trade in US dollar and Zimbabwe dollar was not a government decision. It was a proposal and a request to government from the corporate. So it was a request from them. And we passed the legislation which said that those with free funds can trade in foreign currency. And there are a lot of free funds even outside what we're paying civil servants. So I'm actually surprised that banks are actually not seeing the opportunity. I was a banker myself. I would rush to install infrastructure. So the argument to only base and say, no, look, but if you do this for 3 months, yes, for civil servants it's for 3 months. But we've allowed everyone else with access to foreign currency to freely trade. So why are you not putting the infrastructure for them? So I think banks are just hiding behind the finger. And that argument does not hold water. And we've asked the governor of the Reserve Bank to engage the banks so that they urgently address this unacceptable anomaly. Let me come now to the errant behavior of the corporate. They were saying that, look, can you introduce dual currency? And we passed some legislation. And our view was that you will walk into a shop and someone will say, bread is 50 cents. The rate is 80. So which means that if it's 50 cents and the rate is 80, then bread is $40. Automatically. Right? But what has happened, most corporates in this country have turned themselves into bureau de changes or into foreign exchange trading. They are all trading. So what have they done? So instead of now embracing dual currency, most of the corporates, and we are aware of what they are doing, they are all trading in US dollars via the Zim dollar. So if you walk into the shop, what do? They will say, this is our Zim dollar invoice. And that Zim dollar invoice is based on a rate of 100 for most shops. You find a few that are wayward that will even use 110 or 120. Yeah? They will not give you a US dollar price. They give you a Zimbabwe dollar price, they give you a Zimbabwe dollar invoice. They are also defrauding Zimbabweans. Because they are doing a sale in US dollar, but invoicing in Zim dollar and paying taxes in. That's actual fraud.
You were also talking about the errant behavior of banks and retailers, but it's one thing to be aware of and to point out this unacceptable behavior by the private sector. The question that is most important to Zimbabweans is, what are you doing as a government, as a ministry, to deal with these issues?
We are actually putting into place the necessary monitoring mechanism and the necessary penalty mechanisms, and this will not continue. We are actually addressing it. But you see, this is not the only anomaly. We have run auction now for almost 2 months, successfully, supporting SMEs and supporting the bigger corporates on the auction. But we still notice some companies that are coming to the auction and they've accessed money at 70, 75, and 80. But when you go onto their shops, they are pricing at 100. That will not continue. And we are warning those shops that that should stop and stop immediately. We are not a government that prefers to use hard regulations, tough regulations. We believe in engagement, and we've been engaging. We believe in moral persuasion. But no, this is the last point of moral persuasion to the banks, to the errand banks, and to the errand corporate. This is the last point of moral persuasion. And we have shown in the past now that if we believe that the misbehavior is severe, we will also respond exactly in the same manner.
But you also touched on the foreign exchange market. Are you satisfied with the progress that we have made there so far? Do you think we are getting to that point which you economists refer to as price discovery? Are we getting there?
We are there. If it's not for this few errand players, I will continue to get back to them. We are there. Right? Even the rate of depreciation of the exchange rate is downward. The last auction, I think it was 2.3%. That's very normal in any market. And we are being able to satisfy all the requirements, most of the requirements, about 90 to 80%, and that's how it should work, of everyone who has come onto the auction. So what we are now expecting is that if you access money at 82, price your goods at 82 and get your normal business margin. Don't go for a foreign exchange margin. You are not a bank. You are not a bureau de change. But I have always accused corporates here of all being foreign exchange traders. All of them, that's what they are. They are all foreign exchange traders. We are simply saying, go back to your core business. Make your normal margin. Price at the auction rate. Because that's where you have obtained the money. But that's why I've also said that, look, we are monitoring closely, and we will watch development over the next 2 weeks. But if there is no improvement, again, don't say I didn't warn you.
Do we have the resources to continue to support the auction market?
No, look, I think we do have the money to continue to support the auction, because there's actually a balance. Look, our exports have grown, right? Our mining sector is performing. Gold prices are at record highs. So I actually believe that we do have the resources. But you see, we also then expect the exporters to play their role. This is not an auction just for buyers. It's an auction for everyone. Zimbabwe sits today with $1 billion in nostro accounts, in FCA nostro accounts. Yeah? 1 billion. And I know people always argue and say we have zero import cover. That's a very technical argument. Because the exporters use the money that is in the FCA to buy and to support their businesses. Because if you've got money in your FCA, you don't come to the auction. So if you've got $1 billion US, what is our import? Our critical import requirements can be supported by just $200 million per month. Right? That's what we need for all our critical requirements. And we are sitting on $1 billion US in nostro accounts. So you can take away money that is for NGOs, developmental partners, and on everyone else, which is about 300 million. You still remain with 700 million. So technically, that's 3 months of import cover. So when people jump up and down, and you're also, again, on your favorite platforms and social media, and you're saying Zimbabwe does not have import cover, when I know that an exporter who has got money in their nostro accounts will freely be able to use that money to buy what they want to buy. As government, we are not worried, because we know that the business will continue to run.
Still on the markets, we're now moving on to the stock exchanges. Government is setting up the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Can you tell us, explain a bit more what the thinking is with respect to that? But there's also the issue of the action that the government has taken on the companies that are on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. The view by many people is that this is contrary to the mantra in the position that Zimbabwe is open for business. What are your comments?
Zimbabwe is very much open for business. And I can tell you that there has been lots of investment that is coming to this country. How do I know? I know because we are open for business, we offer investment very generous tax rebates. National project status, we offer them duty-free on machinery. Every day, because I authorize it, I have 2-3 files of people investing, wanting duty rebates. If you want, go back to the budget statement that we issued last year in October. We actually showed the extent of the duty rebates for new investments that we have issued, or people reinvesting, buying new machinery, re-equipping. That's why I said that previously we were importing the Zimbabwean shells. You had only about 10 to 20% of Zimbabwean products. We are now almost to 30-40%. We have identified about 42-43 products that have come onto the Zimbabwean shelves over the past 6 months. But it's because the policies, because are now starting to work, there are leads and legs between the policies. So Zimbabwe is very much open for business, and business is happening. So you might not see the huge investments, big ones, but I can show you 200, 500 that has happened over new machinery, new equipment for new business, medicinal cannabis that is actually coming, lots of horticulture. That is also, there's been investment, lots of it in horticulture. We've seen quite a lot of investment in horticulture, lots of investment in mining across all of the minerals. We have seen lots of also investment coming into that sector. We have also even seen investment into tourism. That's why the president was officially opening 2 weeks ago a state-of-the-art facility in Victoria Falls. Yeah. It's new investment. Yeah. So we have seen the investment. But let me then answer your other question to say, was the action severe? In markets are supposed to trade freely, right? But there is also within markets, for those who are familiar with markets, something that is called market failure. And market failure happens everywhere else. When we had the banking crisis, the global banking crisis in 2008, that was market failure. And what happened? Governments intervened across the globe. What was happening with the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange and what was happening with mobile money network operators was market failure. And it is then when there's market failure, it's the responsibility of government to protect the citizens. Because if you allow the market failure to perpetuate, you actually end up with a bigger crisis. So how do you remedy such an anomaly? You take the necessary action. Some of the action might mean temporary closure so that you allow thorough investigations. And when you know what is happening, you then allow for reopening.
And now the Vic Falls Stock Exchange.
That's a very good development.
Okay. In what sense?
A very exciting development. Because what we are now trying to deal with is that those who can invest and who have their businesses which are going to be predominantly foreign exchange, and you want to raise money offshore, and you don't want to mix the local currency and the foreign currency, the Victoria Falls Exchange will deal with those who are coming into those sectors which are mostly export-oriented or mining-oriented, where all your revenues are coming foreign currency, which means that if you list there, we then allow you to declare your dividends in foreign currency.
I want to go back to the issue of legacy issues because this is very, very important to you. There's an interesting story of some finance minister in a European country who was coming into office and they found a little note from his predecessor, an envelope. And in there was a note which said, there is no money. The question is, how bad was the situation when the Second Republic came into office? Because there is a view in some quarters that things were better then. Things were not as expensive as they are now. So how bad was the situation when you came in? And what are the legacy issues that you're having to deal with at the moment?
Things were not better at all. How do you say that things were better when you were running budget deficits of 40%, and you were printing money left, right, and center. Today, do we have a budget deficit? No, we have a surplus. Are we printing money? No. Since in the past 17 months, we have not accessed the reserve bank window. You can go and interview the governor. The previous government, the law allowed them to access 20%. They were accessing 40%. We came in and said, no, we want discipline. Let's put it at 5%. We are accessing 0. We are not accessing that. But that's a very important fundamental. But there's another side to it, and I mentioned it earlier on. Sometimes, if you are consuming things that you are not paying for, then you don't know their value, and you will price them incorrectly. Right? I mentioned earlier on, and I said, one of my challenges actually now, which is not out there, is that 17% of our budget today goes into legacy. Right? Things, but the government is run on an ongoing basis. So you can't come and say, Iowa, it's just changes. This is not mine. No, we take over. We took over a huge debt of electricity. We owed everyone who was supplying with the electricity. And I'm happy to report that most of the debt we've cleared. But you see, if you're not paying, you don't know the true value, so you give the electricity for free. So it will be cheap. But now, the pain of that cheap electricity came over the past 2 years because we had to pay. We still hear all people for maize, for wheat, consumed 7-8 years ago. We still owe people for fuel, consumed 7-8 years ago. We still owe people for medicines, for equipment, right? Consumed 7-8 years ago. Some of the equipment, especially medical, we even had 100 million that we owe for equipment that was not suitable, right? For use here in Zimbabwe. Right? That was bought in the past. The equipment can't be used, but look, we have obligations, we have to pay. So it's not true that things were better. Right? It's not true that things were better.
They are better now.
Things are actually better now because fundamentally, you pay the true value of what you are accessing, of the services that you are accessing. Yeah? But we have a huge debt because you were buying fuel for 20 cents. We don't have oil fields here for you to buy fuel at 13 cents. Right? But that fuel was not being paid for. We are paying for it now. So we are paying for everything that you are consuming now and everything that you consumed and paid the wrong value over the past 8 to 10 years.
Still on the legacy issues that you are having to deal with, there was quite recently a controversy around the farm mechanization program. What are your reflections on that particular issue?
There was a Debt Assumption Act that was issued and passed by the 8th Parliament. All MPs, they passed it, rightly or wrongly. But when something has been passed by Parliament, right, why should someone then come? Why did they pick on that one now? Why did they pick on everything, yeah, that had been passed by Parliament to say, look, let's revisit? Because Parliament passed many other pieces of legislation. You see? So, Parliament decided that government would assume that debt for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly.
So, as far as you are concerned, that parliamentary decision was the end of the story?
It's not one. Parliament makes lots of decisions. So where do we stop? Where do we start? Revisiting each and everything that was passed by Parliament and then saying, we think we no longer like this.
As we wind up this discussion, later on this month will be the second anniversary of President Emmerson Mnangagwa's inauguration. In your view, as we look to this anniversary, what are the milestone achievements from the finance and economic development perspective, which is really your portfolio?
If you just look at the shocks that we have to deal with, right? Drought, Cyclone Idai, now COVID, no international support, sanctions. If you look at what was thrown at us, over the past 2 years as a new government, what was thrown at us, and where we are today. The stability that we have, the shops are full, people are trading, right? And if you also compare that over the past month, this is the most stable we've seen the economy in the past 10 years. And I have the pointers to actually demonstrate that this is the most stable we've seen the economy.
So one, economic stability.
Economic stability. And we need to sustain it. That's important. But more importantly, I did raise the issue of the trade balance. And to say that, look, we are now exporting more than what we're importing. We are now manufacturing more. The shelves that are saying are full are slowly being filled with locally manufactured goods. So it means that someone somewhere is getting employed. It might be a slow process, but someone somewhere is getting employed. Those things don't make themselves. You can walk into the shops. We even have local pilchards. You know, those funny tin, the fish, we have them locally packaged. Yeah? Then the physical balance was more than, was achieved faster than what we thought. We thought it was going to be a long journey. It was 40%. We now have a surplus. Right? And there was a question which I hope I have decisively answered. That where is the surplus going? I told you where the surplus is going. Right? We know where that surplus is going. I also spoke about 96% of revenue going to salaries and wages. And now it's around 50%. That's a major achievement. I also spoke about non-recourse to the central bank. Because that's what kills economies. So what we are dealing with, even today, I always mention the leads and lags. What we are dealing even today, for this new government, it's legacy. It's the money that was printed then. And we came in and everyone was being told that we have got 21 million US dollars. That was a myth. Yeah? But everyone thought that they had 21 million US dollars. Everyone thought that they were very rich. We had to deal with that as a new government, as the achievement of this new government. Right? Electricity, people don't talk about it. When it was not there, everybody was jumping up and down. Now it's there every day. You don't jump up and down. You jump up and down because you are happy. Right? Now we have given you electricity. You are not jumping up and down. Well, yeah? I thought you would jump up and down to celebrate because you have it. When was the last time you had load shedding at your home? That has been stabilized. How has it been stabilized? It has been stabilized by ensuring that the legacy debt of that free electricity that you consumed was paid. It has been stabilized by making sure that there is efficient running and management of the power utility. It has been stabilized by making sure that you pay market-related, right, tariffs. Stabilized by making sure that even for fuel, which is also an input into electricity, you also pay the real price for it. But again, you only need proper leadership, bold leadership, to make those calls. And a strong understanding of the economy to decide to make the calls. To decide that, you know what, $36 is not the correct price of fuel. And 3 cents per unit is not the correct price of electricity. Yeah? And sometimes when there are discussions, and as technocrats, we are taking the position papers to the president. Sometimes you're actually worried because you know the political implication of what you're taking there.
These were tough decisions.
And these are tough decisions.
They had to be made.
Yeah? So when you go there, and he asks you questions, and he does ask lots of questions. Sometimes you ask you questions and they say, go back. You come back and you present again, and you ask you another question, and you say, go back. And sometimes you look at you and say, those are my. Then you know that you're in trouble. Yeah, and that look, your paper is not passed. And you have to go back. You have to start again. But when he eventually gets convinced and he says yes, that's bold and proper leadership. And for us as technocrats, that's the support that has kept us going. Yeah? So that's one major success, to make politically unpopular decisions, but which in the long run is good for Zimbabwe, which in the long run is good for the people. So one of the biggest achievements of the president is being able to say, yes, this is not an easy decision. This is a decision which is difficult for our people. But the case that it is difficult, that does not necessarily mean that it is wrong. Yeah? There's a difference. A wrong decision and a difficult decision are different. Yeah? The president has been able to support us, right? And to support difficult decisions that we've had to make as an economy.